22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.
And are not afraid to say it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is BlackWestchester.com presents the People Before Politics radio show. Every Sunday, 6 to 8 on INTHEMIXXRADIO.com. I am your host, A.J. Woodson. Black by popular demand. Damon K. Jones is still not here. He's taking a couple of weeks off handling some business, but he will be back, I guarantee you. Couple of shout-outs. Shout out yesterday, I was in the studio on the Nina Monique radio show, 3 to 5 on every other Saturday. I encourage all our listeners to go check out that show. Very good show, talk show structure like this. Had the Innocence Project on, dealing with a lot of people wrongfully incarcerated for the first hour, and then they interviewed me for the second hour, which you can see on BlackWestchester.com. The October issue of the paper will be out this week. You do still have 48 hours, and 48 hours exactly. I have like 3 spots left. If you are a candidate running for office or any business that would like to advertise, you got 48 hours. If you get your artwork and your payment in that time, I'll give you a 10% discount, since we got those are the last few ad spaces. So that's what's up. What else happened this week? I was busy. There was a Save Mount Vernon rally for the unsolved homicides, which was Atif K. Coleman and Jesse Van Loo. They also had a rally yesterday. Pretty good rally. What struck me most after the Mount Vernon Families for Justice rally, there were other families that I had not heard from. One family who has been seeking justice for 6 years, and another family that has been seeking justice for 10 years. That I didn't those two situations I didn't even know about. So their families, as well as how Nas Duncan and Wilfred and Linda Dennis, they're still seeking justice for the unsolved homicides of their loved ones. So that was yesterday. Then Friday there was the lawsuit for Cupcake Cutie had a press conference for a lawsuit for the almost illegal shutdown, the attempted illegal shutdown of their business. That was that took place Friday. I'm trying to think of everything else to happen, but basically, you can read all that on BlackWestchester.com. I want to introduce our 2 co-hosts in the house. We have Dr. Robert Baskerville, PhD, a.k.a. Brooklyn Bob. You thought I was going to say the other name. Brooklyn Bob in the place to be. 1, 2, 1, 2.
And I say,
all right.
Good evening, everybody. Good to be here.
And we have the lovely Latina Lorraine Lopez.
Hey.
In the place to be. So what have y'all two been up to the last week or so?
How about you, Lorraine?
Me?
Yes.
I just been hanging out with my grandson.
Just hanging out.
Hanging out with my grandson, yep.
Okay, well, that sounds like fun.
Remember that large professor or main source? I'm just hanging out.
I must admit, AJ,
Okay.
here your knowledge of hip-hop exceeds mine. That wasn't one of my large professor favorites.
Yes. That was a big hit from main source or large professor by himself. Shout out to him. Still rocking at the age 50. I watched that concert on MSNBC
Last night.
and Janet is still rocking at 52, and she outperformed. She must have performed for like an hour. She
Word.
did all her hits. Q-Tip came out with the joint he did with her. It was crazy. Her performance still dancing, still her condition. You know what I'm saying? Like even when her brother, the last concert, if you watch that, This Is It, the document, the little tape they had of the rehearsal before he died, for the tour. Most of those dancers were 20 something, and they couldn't keep up with Mike. Father Joe, he conditioned them kids well. Like he made them rehearsal all day and all night, and you can still see at 50. It's hard to dance and sing at the same time. Most people,
I have difficulty either singing or dancing.
but to perform on stage, like you see a lot of singers stand still, and they don't.
I got a great two-step though.
Very little movement, but the endurance to be able to sing,
right?
You know what I'm saying, and fully dance. That's an ability. That's endurance. That's incredible endurance. And to do like an hour show, free concert in Central Park, and there was tens of thousands of people. I mean, it was Central Park. It was full. I think Cardi B, I missed her performance. I heard she did well. The Weeknd killed it. John Legend rocked a little bit. Who else is there? There was a few other people. I don't remember. But anyway, the concert was incredible. But it's just great to see, she the same age as me. I'm not dancing and singing at this point on stage, and just you can't, like Big Daddy Kane still does it.
You ain't on Bismarck. I can sing, rap, and dance at disco like B and Billie Jean.
Like Big Daddy Kane he still does the dancing while he's rapping. Like that's endurance, and he's got to be like 50 now or something. Rakim don't dance, but Rakim still ripped the stage.
He didn't.
But
he don't dance.
Nah, he don't feel like he had to dance. He's just that dope as a lyricist. But Kane still can do the split though.
Right. Okay.
And he do the split and come back up like yo, dude, still doing the split. Like yo, that's incredible. So shout out to all the performers out there that can still rock the crowd. You know what I'm saying? And it's good to see, because usually a lot of our entertainers, we don't come out and see, like, the older white groups, like they can still perform, and you'd still see in their 60s and 70s, and people still come out and see them and support their artists. We don't support our artists like that,
right?
A lot of the time. So it was good to see the support and love that she got, and of course she did her in this whole situation of what's going on at a national level. She did her thing about women being disrespected, and I did want to touch upon that as well. If nothing else, the two women who held the elevator.
One was from Westchester.
That I didn't know,
Yeah.
and that I got to look up, because that'll be in the paper if she's from Westchester.
Yeah.
But to held the elevator and got at Senator Flake as he was getting in, and it just goes to show you that one person can make a difference. Two people we never heard of before. They touched him emotionally to the point that
she was a Latina too.
Right. While he voted to get it off the committee floor, he said he is not voting for it in the Senate until there's an FBI investigation. And while Trump had no intention and Graham and all of them had no intention, they were just going to go with the vote. They could not go with the vote. They have to have. Now, this FBI investigation, to be honest, could just be just a formality. They, just to say they did it. I don't know how thorough it's going to be because it's a limited vote and it's limited in time and its scope, which I don't think there should be a limit like that. But we'll see what happens. But 2 women that we never heard of. And one of the women, what was amazing, she had never told her story. Her family didn't know. Her family found out when they watched it on TV. They didn't even know that she had been sexually assaulted. She had never told anybody. You know what I'm saying? Her father found out. That's how he found out. Her family found out that way. But forgive me, I do not know their names, but I do want to give those 2 women a round of applause. Of course it's not working right now. Something else came up. Do you want to do this? I said, no. So anyway, those 2 brave women may have, we don't know what the cause is, but they may have altered history for a minute, because his being voted in was a foregone conclusion. The Republicans were going to just, as they pushed mull through it, they were going to vote regardless, and they weren't going to talk to the friend judge. What's his name?
Mark Judge.
Mark Judge. They wasn't going to talk, and he was the witness in the room that's named, and they weren't even going to talk to him. And now they will be at least talking to him and possibly several other people. So, 2 people whose name you didn't know made a difference. And if certain things come out, they will be the reason that he does not get confirmed, if he doesn't get confirmed, because they spoke up. And that just is a lesson on we need to speak up. We need, regular people can make a difference. And this is at the highest level.
But he hasn't confirmed that it was those 2 women that come to change his mind, did he? Or people are just saying it?
He said everything had an effect. And then right after that, nobody knowing that happened to him, he was taking the elevator to the room, to that floor, and then his friend, and I'm glad you said that, his friend who was a Democrat.
Yeah.
Senator Patrick Coons.
Right. They don't see eye to eye on policy of a lot of things, but they have spent enough time that he respected him. And he got up without saying a word. Like if he was going to the bathroom, he motioned to Coons, come with me. And he went in there, and they had a long conversation. And when they show it like that, it was obviously, I don't know if that conversation would have happened without those women. You understand? Then whatever Senator Coons said to him, that affected him. You know what I mean? So, and he still says he feels that he still feels that Kavanaugh should be confirmed and everything, but he feels that it would be an injustice if the FBI does not get a chance to investigate the whole thing, and they rush through it. And either way, it's still he did his job. Like they were saying on MSNBC, don't give him too much props. He did his job, but at the point where we've seen party over people blindly
party over
right over the issue. He broke ranks with the party for what was right. You know what I'm saying? And he listened to his friend on the other side of the aisle. And we don't have a lot of that going on right now. So we applaud anything like that. When the opposite sides work together. So I just want to big that up as well. So, and I don't know, Dr. Bob, you got any words on that or anything?
No, I mean, I share your general sentiment. I think that there's much more at stake than just the selection of the next Supreme Court justice. There's also a question of both the legitimacy of the Senate and the process that it undertakes in order to fully assess the qualifications and suitability of an individual for the court. But in addition to that, it would do long-lasting damage to the Supreme Court itself were such a controversial nominee not subject to additional vetting because of the allegations that have been raised against him. And I think that when making Supreme Court nominations, the Senate has to bear in mind the long-term impact that a particular nominee is likely to have on the legitimacy of the court and the credibility of his rulings. And at a time when the nation is extremely polarized, it's very important that we select someone who everyone can say was thoroughly reviewed, and in the end, the selection was made in light of all available information about their record and their behavior and conduct, and therefore it was a fair selection. But were they to have ramrodded this through?
Which was their intention.
Which was their intention. I think that even though the Republican Party may have well won the battle to get their particular nominee, someone with their conservative judicial philosophy, I think that the real loser would have been the court. And so in that sense, I think it was the right thing.
Real quick, shout outs to Omi Medina. David K. Jones is listening. D. Wilson, she said good evening. My cousin Tony Robinson in Jersey, what's up? Uncle Frank Trulio of Trusco. I just call it Trusco so much. Trusco supplies and gardening supplies. Trusco, where the trucks go. No. My cousin Tony said she waved. Mount Vernon City Court Judge Adrian Armstrong. D. Wilson said, what's up to me and what's up to Dr. Bob and Lorraine Hay, and said, Lorraine, you have been out for a while. Hope all is well with you.
I have?
Well, last week.
Oh.
She asked where you were last week. Too.
One week is a long time. That's what you need to know.
Your presence was missed. Jonathan Newton from the National Association of Against Police Brutality in D.C. is checked in. Wilfred Dennis, what's up? I was just talking about when I was talking about the family members of unsolved murders in Mount Vernon. His brother was shot and killed at Arts on 3rd 2 years ago, and its 2-year anniversary was September 18th. And as Lorraine and I saw at the store today, the candles are still out there in front of the store.
Yeah, there were a lot of candles out there.
Yeah, the candles are still out there, so I wanted to give him what's up. Damon said, what's up?
What up,
Mount Vernon
What's up,
Councilman
Damon?
Andre Wallace is listening.
Good afternoon, Honorable Councilman.
So Damon, D. Wilson said, hey, Damon K. Jones, hope all is well with you and your family. I stand with you all. Shout out to Nina Spain and Tasha Diaz, all on the check-in. I believe that is everybody's name that I see. Oh, the Future Society, I see them. Is anybody else that I missed? If I missed you, I apologize. Yeah, but this whole thing on a national level is just crazy. This whole confirmation thing, like it's just showing the partisan, just the politics right now is just going crazy because they keep
the party and the gender too. Because if they confirm him,
right,
the women are going to be upset. If they don't confirm him, the men are going to be upset.
But if they confirm him, it will be a rally cry for the Democrats in the midterm election. If he does not get confirmed, it will be a rally cry for the Republicans to rally around Trump. So either way, it's going to be a rally. But at least it appears that fair play is taking place because they wanted to.
I don't know why the Republicans would rally. There is
the rally around Trump. A protection of Trump type of thing. But to
me, it's just a stupid argument,
right? And they were trying to rush it through, talking about the Democrats tried to delay it when they delayed the candidate under Obama for 400 and something days till the new president came in. So I mean, what's good for one is good for the other. Like you can't just delay one 400 some days and then complain that this has been delayed a whole week and you are up in arms. Like, the vote was supposed to happen last week. It's only been like 8 days for the vote being delayed. So, but they delayed, like I said, over 400 and something days. So, and it's and the Democrats were up in arms about other candidates as well. So it's not just the Republicans. It's not a Republican thing. Both parties we're getting too far with this. Too far in extremes with both parties. And that's what. And again, that's what's worthy of speaking of the Jeff Flake speaking with Senator Coons, and I mean, it's worthy. That's not the norm right now. That's the way it should be, but that's not the norm right now. You know what I'm saying? For, you know, to reach across the aisle and have that, and, you know, that's the kind of thing we lost with with Senator McCain passing. We lost that.
I mean, it's important to note that one of the distinctions that's traditionally made between the Senate and the House of Representatives is that the Senate is a much more deliberative body that approaches lawmaking in a much more systematic, comprehensive way. And in that sense, one of the real hallmarks of the Senate, of relationships in the Senate, is supposed to be what's known as comity between its members. That they are supposed to have a more cordial kind of relationship. One reason why is because they have a 6-year term. Am I correct? Senate states is, I believe it's a 6-year term.
What I like to do, just a couple more comments. Damon said, "Hey D Wilson, thanks for your support," and Mikey Bow said, "Blessings, Damon K. Jones, to you and your family." Bovell, I guess that's his last name. I guess that's his last name. Or it must be a CO because they call each other by their last name. What I would like to do, though, even though he didn't come in for this reason, we do have a guest political commentator for both CNN and Headline News. That's what HLN stands for. In the studio, would like him to come in and weigh in on this because I mean this is what we have his expertise, and it would be great to hear from him on these matters. Brother Joe Pinion.
Good to see you, bro.
Now, I know this is not what you came here to talk to, but I can't. I mean, you be on CNN and Headline News. Now you're on People Before Politics. I like to get some
consider the promotion.
Right. I could get take advantage of you being here and let you weigh in on. These are the type of things you weigh in on national news.
Always good to be here.
Yes.
With the Black Westchester family. So it's definitely a blessing.
All right. So I mean, you've heard the conversation we're having. Would you like to weigh in on that?
No. I mean, I think that. I mean, to your point, I think that. Particularly in this rise of tribalism, I think that it is
tribalism is a very good word.
You know, I think that the truth is that there is both at the local level, but especially it manifests at the national level. There is a lack of courage,
right,
from our political leaders, people who are willing to do what they know is right, irrespective of the political consequences. And so I think that, to me, when you see someone who is willing to stand up and say that, look, to say number one, I still believe that this is the right man for the job,
right,
but irrespective that the process matters, the manner in which we do things matters,
right.
And so I think that is rare, and I think that's why so much attention has been focused on. And I think that people are saying, "Oh, well, you shouldn't give him so much attention." I think that it's less a statement about Senator Flake and more a statement of just the state of our politics,
right?
On the fact that we have people who are unwilling to stand up, and as a world, we're so busy being angry or being resentful that we don't realize that the people that we're placing whose trust, who we're giving our trust to, are failing to actually act in the manner that we expect them to do.
Right. Well, shout out to Tracy Cates who's tuned in. What effect do you think, in your expert opinion, because you're, I guess, political commentator, and that's what they ask you for, your opinion. What do you think effect do you see any of this having on the midterm elections?
Well, I mean, I think honestly that just depends on what happens on Friday.
Right.
And what happens in between now and Friday. I think just from a nonpartisan, outside perspective, I think that the reality is that the larger issue, unfortunately for Judge Kavanaugh now, will be the nature of his responses, as far as how he characterized his drinking, whether it was in high school or whether it was in college. But to say that, to me, I would have much rather him preferred it says, yes, I played beer pong, I played quarters, I played every manner of drinking game you can imagine, because that's what we did, whether it was right or whether it was wrong.
Right.
That's my truth. And that didn't necessarily happen. And so I think ultimately, for the purposes of a reopening of an FBI investigation, those are the type of, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit, that whether he was trying to get nominated for the Supreme Court or just trying to get a background clearance to join the FBI itself, would cause problems. And so I think that ultimately, while we have been focused on, and I think I wrote an article for this month's, issue of Black Westchester.
Very powerful.
Just focusing on the nature of sexual assault and what that means and where we are as a society. I think as it pertains to the political implications, I think that is really going to be about the candidness or lack thereof of his responses when pressed on those issues, and also the manner in which he chose to respond on those issues.
Right.
As we start talking about the temperament of a judicial judge.
Before we go any further, I want to say Lorraine has another engagement that she has to be in that's going to make her have to leave early. So she's leaving us. So we just wanted to say goodbye and
goodbye, everybody.
And she'll be back next week, hopefully.
Now she's leaving me. I don't know how to feel about it.
Right. Shout out to Marvin Church, who's listening. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have plenty of recent evidence. See you later, Lorraine. To suggest that the American public is more than forgiving of youthful indiscretions. We have both the example of George Bush I, but also the acknowledged indiscretions that President Trump committed in the years immediately prior to his election. And I think while the American people can forgive people for overindulging at previous points in time in their life, I know when I was a young man, definitely, if you would ask me if I drank, there's been times, yes, where I have been falling down drunk. I'm proud to say I no longer overindulge, but that is a reality. And what people did expect was for the judge to give truthful, honest answers, and there's every indication that he dissembled and was dishonest. And in that sense, he has, in my judgment, disqualified himself.
One of the things they talked about, especially on MSNBC, I watched a little bit of CNN, I watched a little bit of Fox. They were talking about his temperament during the thing. Like, that's not the judicial temperament that you look for in a judge, a federal judge, especially one of the highest positions in the land. And they've been speaking on just his temperament and his responses and the way he responded and got at some of the senators who were asking him questions, doing what they were supposed to do in that process.
Right.
Would you speak on that, like his temperament?
I think that, to me, I think the easiest comparison is obviously the Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill situation. And so I think that if you go back there, irrespective of what your political sensibilities are when it comes to either of the judges, I think that what you saw with Brother Clarence that we didn't necessarily see here with Judge Kavanaugh was a temperate approach in his indignance, right? I think that we always remember that we call it was a high-tech lynching. It was all these things. There was clearly anger. There was clearly righteous indignation, but it was temperate in the manner in which it was delivered. And I think that, to me, more so than anything else perhaps that happened in that, I think that the fact that he was able to maintain his composure while also being able to assert his indignance was a large reason why he was able to get through that confirmation process. And I'm not entirely sure that same type of measured anger, that same type of measured indignance is what we saw here. And so, again, like I said, we are in this kind of tribalist bubble. And so from that standpoint, who really knows what's going to happen or if any of this really matters? Right. For better and for worse, that just seems to be where we are politically, particularly at the national level. But again, if you're just trying to make apples to oranges comparison, I think that's what I noticed, what I took away from it.
I mean, and blind party loyalty, as I have a problem with. Couple of I said Marvin Church, Pat English from Long Island, Jesse Van Loo, Safe Mount Vernon, and Ossining town trustee, I guess that's what you call it, Quintel Bazemore, which is the equivalent of a city councilman in the city. They're all tuned in. I see a lot of blind party loyalty that I have a problem with, and voting because of. A lot of people wanted to support Hillary because she was a woman. I personally thought she was a weak candidate. I didn't vote for her. I heard in our 2015 Mount Vernon election, one of the things I heard from a lot of black women was Ruth Hassel Thompson, that's my girl. Not to say she wasn't qualified, but that's not a reason to vote for somebody because that's my girl. And even and while I do feel she's qualified, and she was on the show, Tish James, for the New York Attorney General, I heard that about her. That's my girl, or we got to get her in, because she's a black woman. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are not reasons. It would be history. Right. And even winning the primary on the state level, she made history. And I think she's quite qualified. Right. But the reason to vote for her is not because that's my girl or because she's a black woman. We had somebody on here say that actually called me a sexist because I wasn't going to support Hillary. Like, it's like, everybody who didn't vote for Obama was not a racist. Right. Some people that were black just did not like Obama. Like, right. Every black person didn't vote for him. And the reason to vote for him, even though it was history, was not because he's black. Right. You know what I'm saying? We got to stop or this is what we're going to do because it's a Democrat. Or this because they're Republican. The blind party loyalty. We need to, and even tickets. I don't like those tickets like, there's like 5 people on the ticket and you vote for everybody on the ticket. They might not all be the 5 strongest people in all 5 positions. Right. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I always say when a whole ticket comes. Well, look, they usually don't like that, but I say that when they're here.
Yeah, I mean this is what's been happening, and particularly, the greatest manifestation of that is at the local level, in our local politics. Obviously now I'm running for state assembly in Yonkers in the 90th district, now trying to bring some common sense to Albany on behalf of my hometown. And again, you go, and particularly when you start talking to communities of color and saying, look, what are your issues? What do you care about? If you care about criminal justice reform, I tell people, look, my record speaks for itself. I've been out here talking about these issues. If you care about economic justice, I've been out here talking about the fact that, environmental justice is economic justice. The fact that we've got, people of means who are literally getting checks from the energy company, whereas we got people living in public housing who are heating the front lawn, that doesn't belong to them. Right, those are the type of issues that I've been fighting for literally my entire adult life. And so to me, when I try to explain to people, they say, look, we can keep choosing, in the name of a party, but if the person that party has put forth is not imbued with the ideals that you care about, then at some point that we're hustling backwards. And so to me, that's obviously a challenge, but I think it's worth the fight to try to get out here, as a community and say that, look, I don't care who you choose to vote for. But if you're, again, I've told people this before, that, you can vote for a candidate, in the name of Christianity, but you can't vote for a candidate in the name of Christianity if that person is not reflecting those values, right? And so that is the issues that we deal with, right now, just saying, look, whatever your issue is, whatever your top 3, your top 2, that's fine. I don't get to tell you what to care about, but I do get to demand that you be accountable and be consistent. And to me, I think the problem that we have is that we have a lot of people, as I think I said last time I was on this show, who, as candidates, have an ability to point to all of the things that are going wrong in the world, to blind voters to the fact that they have zero authority to do anything about them. And the things that they do have purview over, they are reluctant to even talk about.
Right. Well, and I want to be clear, too, the reason that I asked you again, because you are a guest political commentator. No, but because in other words, it could be said that we're speaking about things that you, if you win, could have nothing to do with. You know what I'm saying? On the national level too.
I think again that you can talk about. To me, like I said, I'm at the end of the day, I'm a person, right. And I think that we all go home and talk about these issues with our friends and our loved ones. Again, I think the issue with us as a community is that we allow people to give us, like I said, the low-hanging fruit. The things that we know are wrong. You can't send somebody to Albany in the name of fixing everything that is wrong in D.C. That just doesn't make any sense. That is a lie. You're lying to you're allowing them to lie to you, or you're lying to yourself. But either way, nothing is going to materially change in your life. Again, if we do not align our expectations with our political decisions.
Right. Now, we ask all the tough questions here. So I came across a article, I guess, in the Yonkers Tribune.
Yep.
Your opponent, Nader Sayich, wrote a letter, I guess, to the New York State Board of Elections about you not filing your campaign finances and you not having you're not listed. They were looking you up. They couldn't find you under your name or friends of, or
I can't speak to whether the letter was actually sent. I think that the letter was published in the Yonkers Tribune for different reasons.
Okay,
like I said, all I can say is that, look, we filed with the county. when we established that. That's how we were actually able to open a bank account. You know,
Right.
But at the end of the day, like I said, I got into this race because I was tired of politicians who like to either refuse to take accountability or try to find some fall guy to take responsibility for what happened and what wrong. At the end of the day, it's my name on the yard signs. It's my name, my face on the palm cards. Things did not get filed on time. That is the truth, and I have to take responsibility for that. And if there are voters who are discouraged by that, then I hope I have the 4 weeks remaining in this campaign, or 5 weeks left, to assuage them of any concerns that they may have. But again, we're not running a multi-million-dollar campaign here. It's literally, friends and family, basically putting together $30,000 to make things happen.
Right.
So I think that's the reality. And that's my commitment to the voters, to say that, look, we're here in this race to do the right thing, and to follow the rules. Having said that, separate from that, I think that it is curious that you have an opponent who has been engaged in Yonkers politics for over 40 years. We've had people who have gone to jail, people who have killed themselves, people who have been arrested, people who have gone to prison for all manner of activity, and never in the history of that 40 periods a year was any one of them called a criminal until me. And so it begs the question: what is different in this particular case? What has happened here in this particular notion where all of a sudden this in particular person, who again we're not talking about some type of chronicled lengthy period of time. We made a mistake, and obviously we acknowledge that. But why is it that all of a sudden this campaign is somehow being called criminal? Why am I suddenly now at the tender age of 34 being referred to as a criminal publicly in a letter that is replete with all types of things that would not be put in a letter to the Board of Elections? And so to me, I think that we know which one of these things is unlike the other. And I don't think that has to go into much detail to talk about the long legacy of the fear of the brown people coming.
Right. Well, I wanted to give you a chance to address that. I mean, anytime we have a situation like that, I like to give the candidate a chance to speak on it.
Right.
And I respect that you addressed it. You didn't make up an excuse for it. I mean, like you said, your name's on it, and
Yeah, like I said, it's friends of Joe Pinion. Like I said, we got a bank account. We make all the payments out of that bank account. I mean, that's just the reality. Like I said, paperwork was not filed appropriately, and at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for that, because if the buck does not stop with me, then how can I go out there and tell the voters that I'm going to take responsibility for what's going to happen in Albany in their name? And so that's my approach to it. And like I said, I make no bones about it. That we'll do better.
Shout out to Mount Vernon correspondent Atif Khalil. Shout out to Anthony Old School Mitchell on the check-in. I know he said what's up to all of us. Atif said what's up to everybody. Bob, questions? You got any? You want to weigh in on this?
Well, while as a general matter, I do agree that the emergence of one-party dominance in most of the urban centers here in the United States by the Democratic Party has undermined the ability of people of color to use the Democratic Party as a vehicle to realize their policy objectives. As a general matter, the reason why the Republican Party is looked on with such skepticism is because even when you have good local leaders, they are part of a network of political leaders and party leaders who have a demonstrated historical reluctance both to give support to the general cry for social justice that has been emanating from America's inner city neighborhoods for decades now. And in addition to that, they also have demonstrated an unwillingness to experiment with any kind of policy prescriptions that go beyond the kind of hackneyed free market, pro-family kind of playbook that Republicans continuously call from. And until the Republican Party is willing to once again engage in that kind of serious experimentation that was in the best tradition of people like Fiorella LaGuardia, a Republican New York City mayor who won as the fusion candidate several times, and other sort of more progressive Republicans, like a kind of Rockefeller Republican, although I must say, although I must say today, I would probably.
That's I don't know if that's a good refrain, but
as I said,
look,
that's the bigger issue.
I do understand where that comes from, but I would say only to counter that I meet so many people that say, oh, I wish I could meet a Republican who cared about criminal justice reform. I wish I could meet a Republican who would stand up to things that I believe are racist at the national level. I wish I could meet a Republican who is actively fighting for dignity for undocumented immigrants. I wish I could meet a Republican who is actively on the front lines, willing to speak truth to power. And then when people like that show up and talk about these issues and have demonstrated that they have a willingness to talk about these issues long before they ever ask for somebody's vote, people say, oh, but they're a Republican, right? And so it becomes a self-perpetuating, model here, where, again, yes, there is a hard truth that I have tried to explain to people within my party for a very long time, that then there is a whole cross-section of society whose needs are not being met and whose cries are not being heard when it comes to the manner in which we engage in our politics. But it's also to be said that if we do not have any semblance of support for individuals who do choose to try to make a difference in this two-party system, that again will determine the outcomes for all of us, irrespective of how we feel about the two-party system, then on some basic level we are also conditioning people to turn a blind eye to our cries. And so, to me, all I can say is that, I heard your point before about the Democratic Party and, how just because you don't necessarily want to vote for a Republican doesn't mean that we can't have more vibrant primaries. We barely have primaries. We have Democrats that get in office and they stay there, or in places where they're heavily Republican, we have Republicans that get in office and they stay there, right? The idea is that somehow the only way in which we can have competitive elections, the only way in which we can compel people to actually meet our needs is if somehow it is, that something drastically changes. And I would argue also that the change comes from within, and the change comes from the bottom. Right, when you start talking about the fact that you had those women who obviously got through to Jeff Flake, that is change coming from the grassroots level. That is change coming from the bottom up. When people say, oh, well, what can you do to change the party? I said, well, I'm here. He said, well, is anyone going to listen to you? Maybe, you have talked about criminal justice reform, Joe, but is anyone going to listen to you? I said, well, enough people apparently listen to me for me to become the nominee, right? And so on some basic level, if we're not going to have a willingness to at least say, I'm going to demand of your opponent what I would demand of you. If you said, okay, Joe, then I want you to show me what your plan is for the homeless, I'm happy to do it because I believe passionately that we're underserving those communities. If you want to talk to me about what my plan is for economic justice for people, I say, okay, because I have a plan. If you're not demanding that the other person in the race presents you with a plan simply because they have the right letter to their name, or turn the blind eye to the fact that the only reason that letter is there is to get you to not hold them to that standard, then on some base level, then we can't be helped. And so that to me is my challenge in this race, but also my challenge to my community, to say that, look, we don't have to do things the way we have always done them. And by the way, doing things the way we have always done them has not resulted in us having better life outcomes. And so again, that's obviously an uphill battle. But I don't think it's an impossible battle to win. And I think that, again, that's why I'm here talking to you. That's why I'm here talking to Brother AJ and all the people at home, because I'm trying to get people to understand that if it feels different, it's because it is different. It's because we're trying to do something that people don't typically do. And I'm just asking people to meet me halfway, to say that if you have questions, if you have concerns, come to me with them. Ask me about these issues. But I think, again, I have a body of work that I think, independent of any political cravenness, speaks to my sincerity. As I said last time, my favorite quote from Malcolm X is, sincerity is my credential. And all I can go to people and say that here I am. These are the things that I've done. These are the things that I've worked on, whether I'm working on trying to make sure that, children of color get access to proper funding so that they can go to school, providing them bridge grant funding for those kids, making sure that I can be engaged in youth development. All I can do is say is these are the things I've done, and these are the things that I want to do on your behalf, and present me with questions if you don't think that that's the right plan for your life and your family and your future.
One of the things I want to, when your name comes up, one of the things that I'm hearing is, okay, so why is he a Republican? Why is he running on the Republican line? Because of the tribalism, I guess people don't identify black and Republican at this point.
Right.
Even though I do think that the Democrats often take the black vote for granted.
Yeah.
Right. So, but answer that. Why the Republican Party? Why?
Well, look, I think the simplest answer is because I've been a Republican. You know, when I've been a young Republican, I've been a college Republican. I think that a lot of my Republican sensibilities are more federal. When you start talking about national defense, like I said, the hard truth is that here in New York and in my hometown in Yonkers, we've had Republican governors, we've had Democratic governors, we've had Republican mayors of Yonkers, we've had Democratic mayors of Yonkers. We currently have a Democratic mayor that used to be a Republican. But when you start talking about the life outcomes, particularly for black and brown people living in our city, they have remained very much unchanged. Like I said, when you start talking about 24% of children living in poverty and 76% of the children that attend our public schools are black and brown, and 78% of those children can't afford lunch, let's be very clear about what is happening in our communities. And so on some basic level, the remedies for our misery are not partisan. The remedy for our misery is trying to find individuals who are going to go out there and say that, look, I refuse to rubber stamp policies in your name that aren't going to improve your life. I'll sooner vote no, I'll sooner lose an election than go to Albany and go with the flow, because that's how the gravy train keeps running, right? And so to me, that's, as we started off this segment, talking about a lack of political courage. I'm asking the people of Yonkers, who do you believe has the courage that you deserve? Who do you think is going to actually be willing to go up there and speak truth to power? And I think respectfully, if you don't think a Republican who's willing to stand up and talk about criminal justice reform, to talk about the intricacies of Black Lives Matter, to talk about those issues, has demonstrated a willingness to speak truth to power on your behalf, then I don't really know what else can be done. But again, it's my responsibility to get that message out there, to keep knocking on doors, to tell people that like I said, I'm here to put my faith, my heart in your hands. I'm asking you to give me a chance. I'm asking you to do something that makes you uncomfortable. And I understand that, and I respect that, and understand that I won't take that for granted.
Well, I mean, I want to say firstly, your mere presence, of course, on the show attests to the commitment of Black Westchester newspaper and People Before Politics to providing our audience members with a nonpartisan overview of the various candidates. Although we do each come in here with our own partisan affiliations, quite honestly, many of us think that we're outsiders to the Democratic Party, the mainstream Democratic Party as well, and in many instances, our affiliation is strictly nominal and for matter of mere convenience.
Right.
I think there's a consensus amongst the people affiliated with the show that the two-party system needs to be reformed and expanded so that we can have a greater input of voices and to consider a broader array of policy perspectives than that we currently do, that I grant has fell well short of the challenge of the day. So, I mean, just, in fairness to us.
No.
I know that really didn't reflect so much on us per se, but a broader tendency in the community.
Here's what I say. I said, look, at the end of the day, I'm here to talk about the fact that we've got a casino that makes more money for the state than Mega Millions and Powerball combined, and we can't get roads paved. The fact that it's pumping more money into the state education system than 6 of the 8 racinos in the entire state combined, and we've got 600 children as of Tuesday that just got displaced from their school because of toxic mold, right? And so when you start talking about that type of disparities, when you start talking about the fact that how is it possible that you have literally 450 acres of state-owned land that we should be getting millions in tax revenue for, that the state has basically determined that Yonkers is the Cayman Islands for them, that they won't pay a dime in property tax on any of that land, even though they pay property tax on 90% of the land statewide. It makes you wonder that this is not a coincidence. This is by design, right? So when you start talking about that, when you start talking about the fact that, why is it that, we just had a whole week-long coronation applauding ourselves for the fact that we had student proficiency at 29%, right? Which basically means 70% of what we're supposed to be teaching our children, they do not know. And people are ecstatic. They are over the hill. They are over the moon, right? And saying that, well, how is that possible? And you don't think there's a correlation between that and the fact that we got kids 18 to 24, highest level of unemployment in Westchester County, here in Yonkers. You don't think there's a connection there? These are the things that I think that people don't always connect. The fact that the pure willful neglect that happens in Albany, the inability of the people that we elect to secure the resources that we deserve, the basic bare essentials that we need to make sure that our children have the future that is rightfully theirs, we're not getting. And the notion that we are going to continue to elect the same people, to elect to elect people who are supporting or are supported by the very same people who put us in the ditch, makes absolutely no sense. And again, I tell people respectfully, if you don't think you can vote for me, that's fine, but then I would encourage you to vote for none of the above. Because the notion that we're going to continue business as usual when business as usual has literally left us on the brink of financial disaster, moral disaster, is unconscionable to me.
One thing I just want to say, I don't know if y'all can see it, but as you're looking at the Facebook, the screen of Facebook Live, your last statement, there was a lot of hearts and thumbs up, like just coming up. Shout out to Floyd Myers, Lynn Woodley, Gail Baxter, and I hope I pronounced the name, Miera Danielle. If I mispronounced your first name, I apologize.
Gail is great. Tell someone to have Gail call me. I've been trying to find somebody who has Gail's info, so I'd love to reach out.
Oh, Gail is a very Gail is very active on the show. She calls into the show a lot. So, yeah, she had a lot of questions for Mayor Spano when he was here. she put him to the test. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so I was going to say, in all fairness to Democratic administrations that have dominated many of the the urban cities here in New York State, the responsibility for their failing has to be shouldered in large part by Republicans as well, because of Republican dominance in Albany, both in the state legislature and also for several administrations in the governor's mansion itself. And the inability of the Democratic Party to implement even its most progressive policies has been stymied to a considerable extent by the reluctance of the Republican Party, and I should say, moreover, the I think accurate perception that the Republican Party largely remains in the pocket of big businessmen who refuse to give up on the dime. And I know Joe is going to tell us that there are untapped tax resources that we don't have to rely on.
I'm not even going to say untapped resources. Here's the hard truth. The issues that affect Yonkers. We can have a different conversation about the nation. We can have conversation about how we have not taken the steps to fundamentally redefine or remodel law enforcement, how we haven't taken the steps to fundamentally remodel a lot of the things at the national level that we all know desperately need to get done for our community. But the notion that somehow that we can't be treated fairly as a city is not partisan. The notion, I mean, we had a Democratic majority in the Senate not terribly long ago, and there was no Mega Millions windfall coming to Yonkers. Right? That's just the hard truth. All right, people who try to hide behind, though, it'll be different when we have the power. That's not reflected in the facts. The facts remain, and that over the last, talk about 8 years, certainly over the last 10 years, Yonkers hasn't gotten a bump in municipal aid. That is largely what happened, leading into this, or at least leading into this past legislative session, right? That has nothing to do with partisan rancor.
Mount Vernon suffers the same thing.
I mean, so this is what I'm trying to get people to understand, that to lay our burdens down at the feet of partisanship literally absolves us all of any responsibility that we have, but it also absolves the people that we keep giving our vote of any responsibility. They are not powerless. We like I said, part of the reason why I got into this race, I mean, I think one of the triggers was when I got a newsletter from the previous occupant of this office who told me that they were upset about the rate hike for Con Edison, and wrote a letter to Con Edison. I don't need elected officials to write letters. I need elected officials to hold up votes, to find a group of other individuals that feel similarly, to hold up their votes. I need them to propose legislation that's actually going to make a difference in our life. My grandmother always says, Jamaican, bring your mind to your condition. I need the people to say that, look, these are the resources that we have. And we also know that these are the needs that people have. And how can we allocate these dollars in such a way that at the bare minimum, people might not get all that they deserve, but they certainly get what they need. And the people of Yonkers are not getting what they need. The people of Mount Vernon are not getting what they need. When you hear parents like you this past week or yesterday talking about unsolved murders, that is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that you can go 4 blocks and the murders get solved, and you turn and you make a left and you come on this side of town and the murders don't get solved. That is not a coincidence, and that is not partisan. And so again, I understand the frustration as a people, because again, it is the easiest thing we can do to find a group of people to blame for our problems. But we have the power to make a fundamental change. People are talking about staying the course. We need to be talking about breaking the wheel. That one needs to happen. And we have the power to do so if we simply have the courage to act as a people, and then making sure that the people that we elect have the courage as well.
Damon K. Jones, who's not here, the host of the show, he said exactly. And he also asked a question that I was about to get to. What do you think about open primaries? I know I'm very supportive, and I think we need to get to a system of that, because I'm an independent. Right. I do not want to be a Democrat or a Republican. Right. I don't even want to be identified as either. But unfortunately, that limits my involvement in the primary. Right. You understand what I'm saying? I can only vote after the candidates are already picked for either party, and then I have to choose from that. Where open primary would put everybody on, and the top candidates would then be on the ballot.
Well, look, there's one or two things. I'm not a big fan of these kind of jungle primaries where you end up with you put everyone on the ballot, and whoever the top 2 come out, and those are the people. I think that leads to a lot of bad trade-offs.
But then it allows Republican, like, okay, Mount Vernon and Yonkers. You're a black Republican in Yonkers. There may have been people in Yonkers who wanted to vote for you in the primary. So you had a bunch of candidates against you, and they wanted to vote for you in the primary, and they thought that you were the person, but they're not Republican, so they could not contribute to that primary. So if another candidate got more votes, they couldn't have contributed to you making it to the general election. Right. And you know what I'm saying? And
I think that, to your point, I believe that we should have easier opportunities for people to vote early.
I believe that too. Atlanta has that.
I think that we need to make that easy. I mean, we do have a kind of a problem like that with absentee balloting, but I think it can be streamlined. I do believe that we have the opportunity to make sure that we can make sure that people have the ability to have their voice be heard. I don't specifically necessarily think that, to me, either you're in the party or you're not, right? To me, that I would love to see a world where we have a vibrant third-party movement. I don't believe that. I think part of the reason that people ask me, how are you still a Republican? I said, look, well, I believe that the day I die, and hopefully I die at a ripe old age, but I believe that whenever that day is, there will still be a 2-party system. And having that belief that unfortunately I believe we're a 4-party nation trapped in a 2-party system. But having that belief, I believe that it's worth my time and my efforts to fight to make sure that the needs of the communities that I care about are heard. So I take a slightly more nuanced view of independents voting in respective primaries. I think that, I think that it should be easier for people to change parties. I think that for a voter, it should be easier for you to be able to say, you know what, I want to be able to vote in this Democratic primary in similar ways that they have it in places like New Hampshire or things of that nature, where people have the ability to, and we have crazy. I mean, in order to vote in the primary, in the primary next year as an existing voter, I mean, I think you have to change your voter registration by like October 19th or something like that, or say something crazy. It's like November 19th, right? If you haven't changed your party affiliation by like November 19th of this year, you're unable to vote in that party's primary next year. That's insanity, right? And so I think, to me, that's the greater issue for people to be there. I also think that, to me, I'm a fan of nonpartisan voters. I think that the reality is that part of the reason, to your point, why we have these slates is because people can go in there and they can vote the slate. I think if we had nonpartisan elections, I think that it would force people to actually take a more nuanced view of the issues. Okay, well, hold on. I believe in criminal justice reform. Well, what do these candidates have to say on criminal justice reform? Instead of saying that, okay, here's this particular letter, or here's this slate, and I'm just going to trust that all these people have the right opinion on that issue, without actually forcing them to demonstrate that they actually have passion about those issues.
Damon, he followed that up with, is it systematically
It is.
keeping a group of people from choosing, especially who don't believe in the two-party system?
I think that it's without question it's systemic. I mean, even the way in which the Board of Election is constituted is partisan. And so it is literally baked into the DNA of our political system, this two-party system. Like I said, I think that there are ways that we can alleviate it. I think, ironically, the fact that we do have so many parties in New York could lead to us having more competitive elections if there weren't such severe restrictions on the time period in which people had the ability to change parties. And again, I know they do that for administrative purposes, but respectfully, justice is not administrative. People have the right to have their voice be heard, and it's not about making it easier for things to get filed.
25% of New York voters are independent. I know when you get to the national level, it's even more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we, I think I looked at the poll. There's like over the last 12 years, right? We've gone from having, I think it was something like 70% or close to 80% of voters enrolled in one of the two major parties, and now the middle portion of unenrolled and non-party voters is getting broader and broader and broader as the percentage of enrolled Democrats and Republicans going down. I think that speaks to the deep dissatisfaction that we do have in our political system. And again, I think that if that's the case, then it's up to the voters. For us, I mean, we can pass voter referendums. We can pass referendums and say that, hey, we want to have nonpartisan elections. We can sign things and get that done. There are lots of utilities, at our disposal to get that stuff done. So I think, again, not to talk in circles, but again, we have the ability to fight for the world that we want. We have the ability to start changing the definition of what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a Democrat, what it means to be engaged in these issues. Quick story. Good friend of mine, has worked all over the place, has worked, particularly for child advocacy, was actually a child advocate that ended up working for the city as far as actually being a public defender. Got a call to go work for an interview for the Charles Koch Foundation because they wanted her to spearhead the work on criminal justice reform. Right now, she was like, "Well, I don't know if I can do this interview." I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "You've been engaged in this work your entire life. You're an accomplished attorney." I said, "Why wouldn't you want to go and work for a place that has the bankroll to start fighting for all the programs and the changes you want?" He says, "Well, look, they asked me all these questions about liberty," and I said, "Well, what, you like liberty? You like freedom? We become this thing where the language that we use to talk about the things that we both want is different, and it prohibits us from actually being able to engage in the common ground politics that we know can result in meaningful change." I often tell people, I say, look, there's something terribly, terribly wrong in the world where you've got George Soros on the left who wants criminal justice reform. You've got the Koch brothers on the right who want criminal justice reform, who have all put money towards assuring criminal justice reform. You've got Cory Booker or Elizabeth Warren on the left who want criminal justice reform. You've got people from Rand Paul to Paul Ryan, whatever you think about them personally, who have also said they want criminal justice reform. And yet somehow we can't get criminal justice reform, right? So how is it that you have prominent figures on both sides of the aisle? You have prominent multi-billion-dollar donors on both sides of the aisle that want criminal justice reform. And somehow we can't get criminal justice reform done, right? And so at some point, it's bigger than politics, right? At some point, we have to start having the conversation about why is it that, we somehow have an ability to understand that systemic, racism can exist. We have an ability to understand that systemic inequality can exist. And yet we don't seem to understand how at the macro level, all of those systems can preclude us from even getting stuff done on issues that prominent figures on both sides of the aisle agree on.
I think Bob has a question, but I think part of that is that criminal justice does not mean the same to everybody.
Well,
there's a lot to do with why we can't get it done, because what criminal justice means to this group and what criminal justice actually means to this group don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Well, I'll say this. I would agree with that. But I also think that, again, all civil rights bills weren't created equal, right? So when you start talking about, how do you get a public accommodations bill before you get an actual voting rights bill, right? When you start talking about, if we There's disagreement on the bail system, whether you want bail, cash bails, different things, like things of that nature. There's a whole criminal justice reform is not one thing, right? It's a whole bunch of many different things. But I think that there is an opportunity for us, again, to engage in meaningful dialogue. If I can find somebody who says, I want criminal justice reform, whether we're on the same page or not on this one issue or this other issue, that's a common ground for us to begin a conversation about, okay, what are the aspects of criminal justice reform that you want that I also want? Let's get that done. Right, and that's not happening right now because I think, again, because of this rise in tribalism and people who have figured out that not solving the problems of our lives helps them stay in power.
Absolutely. Shout out to Sean Patterson, Howard, Nesto Acosta, DJ Nesto in Virginia, Simone Combs, Mount Vernon, Eric Marable, also on the check-in. Bob, you have a question or two? Or comment?
I mean, all I can say is that I think that the reason that Brother Pinion is fighting such an uphill battle is precisely because the Republican Party has demonstrated that its overt hostility towards the cause of social justice for persons of color here in the United States. And whatever the pronouncements of certain National Republican Party operatives and elected officials, the party as a whole has shown an unwillingness to compromise and to reconsider the very draconian criminal justice reforms that they instituted starting in the era of the crack. And moreover, the reason that this is so is because the Republican Party's, the linchpin of their coalition is, I'd say, conservative whites who very often are susceptible to racially loaded appeals that very often focus our attention on the problem of chronic crime in America's inner cities. I mean, as Joe well knows, the Republican Party is infamous for the repeated use of appeals and slogans during presidential elections that specifically portray African Americans as a group, as a criminal threat, in order to continue to maintain their majority in the Congress.
You think that's partisan? You think that's a partisan problem that we have in America? Because I don't. And
Joe, you're being disingenuous if you say that the Republican Party.
That's not what I'm saying. If you let me finish, all right. What I'm saying is let's assume that all you're saying is true.
Right.
Right. Because we could sit here for 3 hours. You ain't got that type of time. Right. But the hard truth as a nation that we must face, and like I've said this, is that when you're talking about racism in America, that is not a partisan problem. Racism in America goes wherever it can find the most oxygen at any given point in time. That's just racism is not imbued in our politics. Racism is imbued in the fabric of America. And until we want to engage with it on that level, we're not actually going to get the meaningful change that we want. You can stand up here all you want and say the Republican Party is evil. I say, well, then how do you fix it? And if your notion is saying that you're going to somehow go out there and find Democrats who are going to win in the South Carolina 4th, if you're going to engage in voting for Democrats who have failed to actually demonstrate a willingness to act on the issues you care about, simply to send some type of message to people who aren't going to hear you anyway, then respectfully, that is not to me a common sense policy or common sense approach to having meaningful change. I hear you. Again, like I said, we've had conversations offline, and we can talk about, again, the issues that are prevalent in this nation. There is a reason why less than 10% of people of color are voting Republican, right, at the national level. That is, there's a reason for that, right? And again, you can make the argument that it's not because black people are unreasonable, it's because they're unconvinced, right? And at some point, you have to be willing to be convinced. But also, again, as I said before, there has to be a genuineness, a sincerity in our political engagement, right? To me, people forget often that our politics is strategic first, right? And the fact of the matter is that when you start looking at the fact that, like I said, I've told this story many times, but if you look at the history of us as a people, right, there were people who had many different ideas about how to engage in politics, whether you're talking about individuals who wanted the Mississippi Freedom Party, or whether you're talking about people who wanted to integrate the existing Democratic Party. There was not a consensus there. You had individuals like Martin Luther King who wanted to do it. You had individuals like SNCC who did not want to do that stuff, did not want to do that work. but we understood empirically that both people were working towards the same thing, even if they didn't necessarily agree on the methodology, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, when you look at it talking about people picketing a Democratic convention outside of Atlantic City, begging to be integrated with a Democratic caucus that literally wanted nothing to do with black people. But in that process, being able to get not 10 seats, not 50 seats, 2 seats. 2 seats, and one of them wasn't even held by a black person. And then going from there to understand that what effect that had on the process. Talking about the fact that you had an opportunity as a people to actually be able to impact change because you had a political figure with the political courage to drag a party that wanted nothing to do with the needs of black and brown people onto the right side of history, in spite of the racist roots and whatever shift happened. And then as we realize now that the prejudices that exist in the fiber of who we are as a nation found a new place to breathe. And we play this game where we play whack-a-mole with hatred and prejudice, and we understand that. But my commitment is to say that there are people committed to doing that work, but we have not engaged in the politics of strategy. We have not engaged in actually being mindful of not just the party we're voting for, but what the person represents. That is the problem that we're dealing with right now. And to me, this whole notion that we're going to be so mad we're going to vote against our interest, which happens time and time and time and time again, because the machine tells us to do so. I could tell you the amount of people who have said, Joe, I really like you, but I'm terrified to vote for you because I think someone's going to find out. Or I'm terrified to vote for you because my daughter works for the school system and I don't want her to lose her job. I mean, this is what's happening. We are a community that is gripped by fear. The fear of people trying to take away what little power we have, what little responsibilities we have, the fear of being able to step out on the limb and say, I'm going to do something different because what we have been doing has not worked. That is the challenge. It is not comfortable. It is not sexy. As I said before, you can't put it on a t-shirt, but it's what's required. If we are going to start to fundamentally shift who we are as a people. Because I promise you, if we continue to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, we will get nowhere. It is not a coincidence that you got kids. I went to the Force football game this past weekend. Kids just as talented than I was. But the vast majority of the kids on that field will not have the opportunity to go to Colgate University on an athletic grant the way I did. Because we are not preparing them to have that opportunity. Because we don't have freshman teams. We don't have junior varsity teams. We don't have the capabilities to have the film required, to send that off to colleges, to have those parents be informed about the recruiting process, to make sure that the things that have to happen before they even turn 16 have happened to put them in a position to have a better life.
I want to interrupt you real quick. Gail, and just want to speak to Gail. Gail, we addressed that. She has said, please ask Mr. Pinion to respond to the issues raised by his opponents regarding legal issues relating to campaign misfilings and funding sources. I don't know if you want to reissue to, but he has answered it, and you can go out to the beginning.
We actually, like I said, at the end of the day, it's my campaign, and we made a mistake. That's the reality. Having said that, it's very clear. I mean, my opponents raised a whole lot more money than I have. So notice that somehow we're trying to hide where our resources are coming from is kind of ridiculous. And
I want to give Bob a chance to comment to your comments.
I really just don't know what to say.
Look,
I think, personally, Brother Pinion, I knew who you were the first time you walked through. I have a lot of respect for you, right. And you really did stand out on the national stage in your role as commentator because of your ability to sharply articulate the issues on national television. And I think you did an excellent job and do an excellent job of representing long-standing Republican principles. It's not always so clear to me, however, in the discussion, how the policies that you're advocating are going to actually advance the interests of the communities that you would like to represent, since it seems to me that you would be in a clear minority within your party itself for those type of proposals. But I want to say, but more broadly, I have to come back to a point. the Republican Party continues to flounder in the way that it does because you are the inheritor of about 50 years of vociferous opposition on the part of the Republican Party as it begins to recruit very conservative whites who come from the heart of the old Confederacy in their battle to overturn the advances of the New Deal, to destroy Johnson's new society programs, and all of the other kind of policy innovations that at the very least soften the blow of capitalism, free market capitalism, on African American communities. It's just, it is indefensible what the Republican Party as a whole has done. And so while some people may be persuaded that individual Republicans have to be given a chance, for me the larger question is, what kind of policies is the Republican Party as a whole going to support?
Well, there you go. So that's a good question. So we can address that. I think, not to get sidetracked, but again, I think to me, you know, we can talk about the racism that is rooted in America, and we can talk about the racism that is rooted in our, or the prejudices that exist in our national politics. I'm here fighting for Yonkers, right? I didn't walk away from a contract on cable news because I was thinking I'm going to go down to D.C. and fix that insanity. We're here fighting for Yonkers, right? And so when I look at it from that perspective, we're not talking about the heartland. We're not talking about 50 years of policies that have been imbued at the national level. We're not even talking about the failures from a partisan standpoint here at the state level. Because on some basic level, that is not the greatest impetus for why the outcomes for us as a people have not changed in the last 40 years in this city. My commitment is to say that, look, you want to go issue by issue? Let's talk about schools. We've got a quote-unquote Yonkers School Reinvestment Act, $1.6 billion, close to $2 billion that people have been fighting for the better part of 6 years, right? You know, if you have my opponent tell me the check is actually in the bank account, come to find out the check is actually still in the mail, and we've never gotten it, right? So when you start talking about it from that perspective and saying that, why is it that we can't get the money? Why is it that we live in a city that pays more in taxes than the second, third, and fifth largest cities of the state combined? We're the fourth largest city, and we pay more than all of them combined. How is that possible? That we're getting a 70% reimbursement on capital reinvestments, whereas places like Buffalo and Rochester are getting 98 cents on the dollar. How is that possible? What is different about us? Right, again, when you're not considering the makeup of our school population, when you're not considering the fact that across the board, we just don't get what we deserve. I looked at the football field this past Saturday over there at Gordon in disrepair. You would go inside that gym, it's in even worse condition. You can go over to Saunders, where one of my former opponents is the high school coach. That gym is in complete and utter shambles. So why is it that you go to the PAL and the roof needs to be fixed, and it's leaking, and there's no real air conditioning but fans that existed in the 1980s? Why do these things exist here? That is not partisan. And so when you start talking about policy, things that I want to get in place, right? First thing I want to do, again, is start talking about how we can have a program that I call Cut the Cord, right? Cut the Cord starts saying that we need a pilot program to invest in actual community solar gardens. Right? People talking about community vegetable gardens. I want community solar gardens because I want to be able to offset the cost of energy for people who are living in public housing. We know that people living in poverty spend somewhere close to 30% of their disposable income on the electric bill. Money they don't have, trying to heat up a home that can't keep heat in it. So those are things I want to do, to start saying that, look, we can create a program where all of a sudden that's one less bill. That's $1,000, that's $2,000, that's $3,000 extra that can be going to those families. Or better yet, saying that, look, we can allow the city to do what private citizens do, to sell back that excess energy to the energy company through these community solar gardens, and then use that as a actual impetus to get people to engage in the sensible behaviors that we know work. To say that, look, hey, turn off those lights, because 10% of this money that comes in from this energy company, 15% of this money that comes in from the energy company can be going back into your bank account. Those are sensible, common sense policies that we know can work, that can actually empower our community, right? That doesn't require a whole heap of money, right? That's just sensible policies. I'm here talking about the fact that we've got homelessness in this city because, as I said last time I was here, we've got the county and the city engaged in a self-deportation plan for the homeless. We've got showers that are available 1 to 2 days a week whenever they feel like it. So if you can't grant people the dignity of general hygiene, how in God's name can you expect them to fix their life? We're talking about saying to cities, saying at the state level, that we can demand that people have access to showers. That is not of overwhelming cost. All we're talking about is water. And a lot of that's been factored in already. Right? All we're talking about is keeping a certain square footage. We've got programs in other states where people have mobile units that cost no more than literally $100,000 a year to maintain. They can provide showers for tens and thousands of homeless people. They can do it in California. They can do it in San Francisco. We can't do that in the 4th largest city here in Yonkers, and then be able to share those services with a city like Mount Vernon. These are policies that I'm actively fighting for, right? So again, when I start talking about, well, why are you Republican, and talking about the Republican Party, that has nothing to do with the pain and suffering that we have right here at home. It is a game of the chicken or the egg, and we sit here fighting about what came first, the chicken or the egg, and meanwhile, everybody is starving.
We have a comment. Someone, Louise Cherico, she actually agrees with Bob. She said, exactly, Dr. Bob. It doesn't matter if they are a Republican, if there is a Republican city council under this GOP party will not be bipartisan. His constituents upstate will not support him.
Well, here's the thing. What constituents upstate? Because here's the truth. First of all, if you go to the assembly, you're talking about one vote. So again, I think people need to remember what we're talking about. We're not talking about going to Congress. We're not talking about going to the U.S. Senate. We're not even talking about going to the state Senate. We're talking about getting policies passed that are going to affect Yonkers, right? I'm talking about going up there and proposing policies that will impact people and impact communities. I promise you, if I propose a policy that's going to make sure that states are required to provide adequate showering opportunities for cities that have a population over the size of 100,000, over the size of $120,000, that people who live in Rochester, who believe that black and brown people who have been underserved deserve dignity, will vote for it. I don't care what party they're from. If you don't think that people who live in Syracuse, people who live in Buffalo, don't agree that on some basic level that we need to make sure that we have after-school programs for our youth, because somehow we have to understand that when you start talking about opioid addictions, that if you don't have things for kids to do in those danger hours between the hours of 4 to 6 p.m., bad things happen. If we don't think that there are going to be people who will support common sense approaches that allow us to even enter into public and private partnerships, to get out there and say that, yes, it was a great thing for us to get to get fire and the police departments involved with our high school football programs. But what about talking to some of these foundations? What about talking to some of them and saying, can you sponsor one of our teams? Can you sponsor Gordon's high school football program? These things don't cost an exorbitant amount of money, but they are the first things to go when it comes to balancing the needs, the financial needs of the city. Because the first thing to go are the core policies and the core services that we know make a difference in people's lives.
I mean, so let me say firstly, Joe, I think your suggestion for community solar gardens is to be applauded and is deserving of more exploration. At a time when we suffer from a serious climatological crisis,
and when we're also looking at a severe energy crisis here in Westchester with the closing of this nuclear plant that we have here.
Right. So it does address two pressing needs, I think, in ways that look to go beyond the accepted policy prescriptions. But, I found it interesting, Joe, when you provided a rationale for why we should implement this, that you cited in particular savings for consumers who you maintain currently act irresponsibly when it comes to their
No, that's not what I said.
Utility spending. You said they leave their lights on too long.
I said that the reality is that we can give people the nudge they need to actually do things that we know will be in their best interest. That is the impetus of what I'm saying. And the reality is we know that. It's like, for instance, I went to, again, got to play Division I college football. I had no idea what the SAT-2 was. I remember I was all excited. I got this letter from Dartmouth University. I got a letter from the University of Michigan. I thought nobody could tell me anything. Miss Cassell walked into my classroom. She saw all these letters. I was over here acting like I was everything. She took the letters, ripped them up, put them in the trash. I said, "What are you doing?" And she said that, well, that doesn't matter because if you don't do well on this SAT-2 writing test, you won't be able to get into the school, right? So when I start talking about the societal nudge required to give people an incentive to do what we know is in their best interest, I'm talking about giving people their very own Miss Cassell experience. I'm talking about being able to go there and say that, look, there is a SAT-2 writing test, and you might be a great writer, but if you don't know where the commas go, if you don't know that the fact that this is how to actually understand where punctuation is, what's supposed to be capitalized, what's not supposed to be capitalized, where to put your quotation marks, guess what? All these great opportunities that are in front of you, you will not reach them. And so that's what I mean. I'm not out here trying to act as if people are irresponsible. What I'm saying is to focus people. The greatest thing about government is that it has the ability to focus people on what we know can make their lives better. It's the government's job to set the conditions for happiness, but it's also the job for it to make it as easy and as plainly followable as possible for people to go get happiness and opportunity for themselves. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not about trying to label people as anything other than normal people. People are people.
Yes, but your underlying premise, Brother Pinion, was that the cause of the financial shortfall that people experience on a regular basis is through their own profligate spending.
No, that's
okay,
not true.
Because
hold on. Now we have to be accountable.
But you could come back to it if you want.
Because when I started it, the first thing I said before we got to all of this was the fact that we have people of means who get tax credits for having solar panels on their roofs, and we have people who do not have means, who literally, because they live in energy inefficient public housing that we have not invested money in, that we have allowed to crumble and be neglected, are literally heating the outside lawn. I started with that basic premise. That is no fault of their own. If you live in public housing and we neglect public housing and you're spending money heating a building that is not energy efficient, then your electric bills are going to be higher. That is a fact. So I started there. Then I went to, again, the next aspect of that, which is getting people to engage in more optimal behavior. Both can happen. That is not me blaming people. That is just me saying what is happening, what we know is happening, and the conditions that we can set to make sure that we as a people get better. So I understand where you're trying to go with it, but I don't think we're really going to go there because again, that's not what I said, and that was not in my intent, and that's not in my spirit. And so I understand why we keep trying to have this conversation where it's Republicans. I could have run in this race as an independent or as just the party of Joe Pinion.
I would still have a substantive objection to the policy prescription that you just presented, and now I'm going to take an opportunity to say why.
Okay, go ahead.
Because the most straightforward way to ensure that people make sufficient money is to institute a minimum wage that requires employers to give people more money, since the thing that determines how much money a person actually receives in the way of compensation is conflict between them and their bosses. There is no natural rate of profit. Currently, America's corporate sector is getting too much frickin' money, which is the real problem here. America's economy is not in any way suffering from a lack of vibrancy. America's the richest society in human history, and on top of that, we have people who make gobs of money, unseemly amounts of money, while their subordinates, the lowest level employees, make crap. And the reason why I mentioned the Republican Party, because as you well know, Brother Pinion, the party that you are representing has fought tooth and nail against any kind of fair, equitable tax on America's wealthiest individuals and its corporations. The reason Yonkers schools are starving, because we've been cutting back on taxes. People who have more means need to be paying more taxes, including New York State corporations.
I have a question for
that's actually just factually inaccurate.
It is factually accurate if you take the historical baseline of tax rates here in the United States from the Eisenhower administration, 1958. The highest tax rate is about 94%.
If we can just stop for a second, you're yelling about things that I don't disagree with you about.
And
So
I want to get to a question from the audience. Gail Baxter, actually.
Yeah.
She says, where does your passion come from on issues related to the school system in Yonkers? The examples you have provided existed for decades. Question, as a Yonkers resident, why haven't you stepped forward with your ideas, suggestions, and advocacy on behalf of children and families until now? As Dr. Baskerville mentioned, your election to office is doubtful. Now that our community is aware of you, what other plans do you have that could benefit communities of color, especially Yonkers, going forward?
Well, that's a very long question.
Well, that's Gail.
Break it
That
down.
means that's Gail.
You know, I think that, like a lot of people, I was engaged in my local community, and I was engaged in doing the substantive work of trying to make sure that my family was taken care of. I've got a 98-year-old grandmother. I've got a mother who just who recently retired. You know, again, I have extended family and cousins of that nature, and so I think like a lot of us, like I said, I've had the opportunity to travel the country and talk about the issues that I care about. Like I said, I've traveled the country. I've done a 10-city tour talking about environmental justice. I've done a national tour talking about truth and reconciliation when it comes to the criminal justice system. I've traveled to Charlottesville. I've given lectures, you know, in all parts of the country about these issues. And so again, you say, why am I not talking about these issues? I thought on some basic level, as a young person, again, I'm not the oldest person in the world, that I was doing the work that I thought would be beneficial to my community. But I think, particularly in the light of the changing dynamics of politics in our nation, we're at, I believe, a watershed moment in this nation's history. And I think that if you look at it from that perspective, you know, I think that I looked around and says, well, my goodness, what's happening where I come from, right? And it's very easy to get satisfied sitting on a high horse, you know, getting beamed into 150 million homes, talking about issues in a very nebulous way that, again, maybe a couple of people will hear and they will like, maybe you'll move forward, but ultimately the true work and the true change happens locally. And so I made a commitment, I think, again, as I started looking at what was happening right where I lived. You know, when I started looking at the fact that, I mean, again, not to beat this homeless issue to death, but when I'm driving down Yonkers, heading down to Nepperhan, and I see a line of homeless people standing outside of a building that's supposed to be open for them to shower, and it's not open. After they've traveled, you know, miles to get there, because we know the homeless population is nowhere near the old bathhouse. So when you look at those type of issues, and you start opening your eyes to what's happening right in front of you, I think I felt compelled to do something, to say something. To the notion that, you know, getting elected is doubtful, I said, look, I'm here, I'm talking about these issues. You know, again, I appreciate the doctor over here, because again, I know where he's coming from. But again, my question to you, because again, I was a little heartbroken. I heard you endorsed my opponent last time.
No, I don't.
he was here.
No, I don't know that I actually did, Joe. Actually, I've tried to encourage our audience members, especially because your candidacy is so unique.
Right. But
to give you a serious look.
Right. No, but I think, to me, you know, my challenge, you know, to the entire community is to, if you want to hold me to a higher standard, I accept that and I welcome that. What I want everyone to do is to hold everyone in the race to the same standard.
Well, I did want to change the lane, going a little bit in that direction. Real quick.
Maybe you're right.
Maybe
I did.
So
honesty is a requirement. So I think I might have said something like that.
So in the September issue, I don't know if you got a copy of it. There's some out there.
Oh, I didn't grab it yet.
Okay, so in the September issue, took out a very powerful ad. So in the September, and I don't know if you got a copy of it. So
I didn't grab it yet.
Okay. It says Joe opinion. It says September issue. Anytime, any place, and you left your number. Very powerful. Joe's ready. We had both of you on individually, and before the primaries, right. And you said that you would come back on the show and debate any one of the candidates that won.
Correct.
When Nader was on the show, right. And I think it was after. Well, we asked both candidates at the time, and they both agreed on the air that they would come on a future show after the primary, and have a debate with you. So I'm revisiting that with you on the air right now.
Well, as the article said, as the ad said, we are ready. I'm ready to have and a real debate. I think we do a lot of these canned forums where we get a lot of 60-second sound bites followed by a 30-second sound bite. We need to have a full airing of these issues. I mean, like I said, this is the first contested election that a truly contested election at the state level we've had in Yonkers in 8 years. You could argue 10 years, right? This is the first opportunity as a city. We've had the opportunity to sit down and say, the vast majority of the people of Yonkers, because we've had the 37th, but that's not the majority of Yonkers. This district represents the heart of Yonkers. And so it's a unique opportunity for us to sit down as a city and say, what has been happening to us? Why is it happening to us? And who has the plan to change it? That is the substantive work that I want to be engaged in. And so again, that is why I got in this race. I'm ready to have a debate here. I will hope that it would be a full and robust debate, because as I think I said last time, you can't talk about 40 years of misery in 40 minutes. I mean, we got to talk about some things, and that's going to require some time. That's going to require honest discourse.
Well, most people who have watched the show know our next guest who just walked into the room. Mount Vernon Councilman Andre Wallace has entered the building, and I just wanted to say what's up to him real quick. I know a lot of what we talked about, some of is Yonkers, but we've talked about parties and a lot of other stuff, and I know you were listening on the way here. Would you like to comment on any of the conversation that we've already had, in your opinion and your...
Well, basically, Brother Man has it all covered here. So there's nothing else to add. He already explained it, and I was listening to Bob speak on some issues. I see, very informative. It was very, very informative, and I love the idea of the solar panels.
I didn't get a chance to tell you.
It's a good thing.
I was actually working with the Councilman Andre Wallace. Actually, he's a contractor, and before he was councilman, he was trying to bring...
I'm still a contractor. And
well, I mean, yeah. But before he was...
Don't kick me out.
Before he was a councilman, though, he was working on getting one of the solar companies into Mount Vernon,
right,
and bringing jobs, training individuals to be, so in that industry.
Right.
I'm not sure whatever happened with it, but I know that was something that he was very big on.
Yeah.
What was the outcome?
Well, we're still working on it. We partnered up with some other people in the city, and a lot of folks are still going down there to do a lot of the work. And there's a few things that I'm going to be revealing shortly regarding solar and the training in our community. So we did follow up on that. We're still following up on that, and there are people out there already that came out of the class that are doing it actually right now. And as they continue to just get everything under their belt, they will be coming back, and then we'll be presenting something big.
Okay. And I wanted to bring that up because I know you were talking, and that's something for the last couple of years, even before office, that was
right,
he was working on. Before he even got in office.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I mean, to me, at the end of the day, like I said, my goal is for us to have an honest conversation as a community and as a city. And again, to say that, look, I don't care what your issues are, but if you have a standard for that issue, then hold my opponent to that same standard. If you're looking for a legacy of work on the issues, then hold my opponent to that same standard. Because to me, at the end of the day, when we get into a situation when we start accepting less than, that is really how we got in this situation as a community in the first place, willing to excuse the failings of people simply because of the party they're in or because we happen to like them. And I think that that's what needs to change more so than anything else in our politics. And to your point, again, look, we do have dire inequalities, right? I mean, again, you talk about, the hard truth is that the reality is that whether you're a person of color who is rich or you're a person of color who is poor, you have less money than your non-color counterpart because of the fact that you inherit less money. And the reason that you inherit less money is because the reality is that my great-great-great-grandfather was prohibited from owning land, prohibited from having a bank account, right? That is rooted in the current struggle of what we deal with today. And so again, when you start talking about systemic inequality, you start talking about economic inequality, wage inequality, wage is stagnant. That is a fact. That's not, again, to me, that's not partisan. That's just that's a financial reality.
I want to ask you another question, and then I want to ask Councilman Wallace a few questions. But while it may not be in the power of the position that you're running for, I wanted to get your thoughts on the MGM potential purchase of Empire Casino, and I'm working on a editorial actually. Is MGM the type of community partners we want here in Westchester?
Right.
When
I think we talked about that briefly.
Right, when they have a lawsuit against the over 1,000 shooting victims outside their hotel in Vegas. Is that the kind of partner we want here in Westchester? And again, like I said, it may not be within the position of the what you're running for to stop it. What is your thoughts as a Yonkers resident?
Look, I mean, I think, as I told you before, to paraphrase, Brother Kanye, that's a really bad way to start a conversation with a community, right? And so I think that when you start from there, understanding that the type of tragedy that was experienced. I mean, people. I mean, you hear some of the footage. I mean, obviously, I've been in the news industry, and so I mean, some of the footage. I mean, it's the eeriest thing. I mean, just literally fields of dead people and cell phones ringing, and with lights going off. I mean, it's something you really can't imagine. And so, to me, the notion that somehow we would put the litigious needs of a company first, to me, like I said, I firmly believe I'm tired of politicians that don't take responsibility, but I'm also tired of corporations that don't take responsibility. And I think it would have meant more, irrespective of the fact that maybe there would have been a few people that found a less than good-natured lawyer and gone after them to come forward to the community and say, look, here's the reality. Here's what we want to do for you and what we can do for you, and please work with us. And I think that would have been a much wiser approach and a much more humane approach to deal with it.
Suing people
than
them
proactively suing people,
right.
To go venue surfing, to find the friendliest court confines to make sure that you're lowering your liability. I just think there's something, whether people want to talk about, whatever it is, I think there's something unsavory about that. And I think that people who are unwilling to speak about the unsavory nature of that, then I think maybe you should question their motives.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you before the end of the show. Councilman Wallace, I definitely wanted to bring up, since you're in the studio, I thank you for coming by. I know you recently had a press conference basically asking the question, is the Thomas administration using the water department as its personal slush fund? You made certain points, and I'd like to get you to bring that up now. I mean, which the mayor has debated and denied that there was any truth to what you were saying.
Well, of course, anything I say they're going to deny, and denial is the first step in trying to get out of things that you don't want the people to know that you're in. As far as I'm concerned, I've been watching the excuses and the explanations that has been coming out. And if I was not accurate on what I was saying, you would need not to explain yourself line by line. So it's going to get interesting because, as my next issue for the county press comes out, it's going to be speaking about that, as well as, some of the other issues that I'll be covering in other places as well. But the way I look at it now is during that press conference, many people were asking me, was I correct? And I'm still telling people, take a look at your water bill and then ask me after that. So we've been getting a lot of people coming in with their water bills, and every day somebody's calling me and trying to get their water bills over to me. And we're going to address that, because right now, the way it looks, the people of Mount Vernon have been grossly overcharged. And as you see, the water superintendent came out and got on television and said that they did raise it after they said they did not raise it. And then they said they only raised it like 13%. Well, you're going to have more explaining to do, because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing, went through the numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet. I want to
give an opportunity.
You're going to have more explaining to do, because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing, went through the numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet.
I want to give an opportunity.
You're going to have more explaining to do, because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing, went through the numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet.
You're going to want to give an opportunity.
You're gonna have more explaining to do because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing over numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet.
I want to
Right.
I want to give an opportunity.
You're gonna have more explaining to do because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing over numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet.
I want to give an opportunity.
You're gonna have more explaining to do because I called New York City and I look at the whole thing over numbers, and he said this is an expected increase. They haven't increased it yet.
I'm aware of the lawsuit about the problems with the sewer system and all that.
Right.
What involvement does the water department have on that? Is the water department even involved?
Zero.
Okay,
Water
well,
department.
that answers my question.
Zero. The water department has nothing to do with the sewer system or the water storm system. I mean, the water. But what they're trying to do is confuse people. So he's saying that they increased it, which now they're saying that they know that what they're going to increase it before New York City even tell what they're going to increase it. So just as he said they increased it 13%, anticipating that, they're wrong, because we got 1.25% is the increase. So you're grossly off. So don't guess anymore. That's one. And two, when they talk about the sewer system and they're saying that they're going to spend money on that, the water department's job is to only collect money and to deal with the getting the water from New York City and getting the water to people's house. That's it. That's the only piping. That's the only thing that they have to do. They have zero to do with any sewers or any repairs on that behalf. That all falls under DPW work. Now, think about this, and I want residents to really, really think, okay? The mayor had a whole big campaign, as you see. He went on, he blasted the council, he blasted the controller about this DOJ thing. He said he needed an engineer, he needed to fund the planning commissioner, and he needed some more bodies in DPW to work on the sewer. Did you ever hear him say that he need more people in the water department? Or he need anything for the water department? No, because it has nothing to do with it. But now that he's busted, okay, it all has to do with the water department, right?
After your press conference, he gave a comment specifically to News 12. And he mentioned, because you said it was a slush fund for the mayor, that this has nothing to do with the mayor. Every extra, any extra money goes to the controller. He told News 12. The city recently raised the rates for the first time in 3 years, but he does not anticipate another hike in the near future. He added the rate went up because New York City, where the Mount Vernon buys his water from, raised the rates. And that was what he said. But that's what he said the day of the press conference, September 25th. But in the letter that just went out, is now saying in anticipation of the rate. So which one of those things? And Bob has something to say on that.
Now you see it.
I'm going to ask a question, a basic question. What role does the city council have in the establishment of water rates in the city of Mount Vernon?
First of all, he has broken the charter. He has broken the law.
Right,
because see, if you go to you'll see it there. It's in the city charter on number 49.
49. Pull up
on the water rates, and it tells you right then and there that the only people or body that can raise or set the water rates is the city council, and we did not raise the rates. So how are you raising the rates? It's another defiant of the administration overstepping their boundaries, and they're overcharging people, and it's illegal. And everything that they're doing there is illegal. At first, if you remember, and if you look at what they wrote in their article, first they attacked me. They said there was no such thing. I lied about TVs and it's fake news. Yes, but you did buy 25 flat screen 50-inch TVs, and we only account for 6. Okay, where's the other 19? Okay,
so let me Bob
and I can go on with the list.
Bob wanted me to read. So whenever the city shall own and operate systems of waterworks, the city council shall by ordinance provide for the levy and collection of frontage tax on real estate established rates to be charged and paid annually for the supply of water in buildings, establishment, trades, and private houses, and shall provide the use of water meters and ascertaining the amounts of to be charged for the water supply system. It's interesting that you said that, because I believe that there, in our story, and I wrote the story, I was talking about many residents before you actually had your press conference. Many residents spoke to me about their bill going up, and one person even talked about some new meters or something did the city council approve these things?
Well, look at this. They claim that they put in new meters, okay?
Oh,
and
yeah,
the water has gone up.
The meters that are more accurate, because the
Right.
other ones were just estimating it. Now they're giving you an accurate account of your
That's
water.
happening in Yonkers too. All of a sudden, everyone's got digital meters.
Yeah, but
We need to beam our water usage into space, apparently.
right. But think about this. He says they're tracking the water better, but by his own report, on the same report, there is no additional consumption of usage. Actually, the consumption has gone down from 2017 to 2016. The lost water rate has even gone down from 25% to 24%. There's no, so obviously there's some missing water someplace. Actually, look at it near the beach has gone down from 2017 to 2016. Besides that, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And if you look at that, the price, so obviously there's some missing water someplace. Actually, has been near the beach more than down from the consumption rate. Besides that, you know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And if you look at that,
Councilman Wallace, I just want you to make this clear for all of us. If it is indeed true,
it is true
that the rate for water went up since the Thomas administration began, and the city council did not authorize an increase, then that means that the mayor has broken the law by unilaterally increasing the water rate. Correct?
Correct. It's basic. You know what the problem is that, and this is an old trick. I went back and I did all the research. It started on the Mayor Daley out of Chicago with the Crooked Chicago Gang. You know, where they figured people would pay attention to their tax bills normally, but nobody pays attention to the increase on the water bill.
Right.
And any time when he set out in his plan was we could raise it and we could collect this slush fund and do all of these things. And whenever somebody says something, you say, well, you're using more water. So then people would start to figure out, well, I better stop taking all these showers or something.
Residents that came to Black Westchester before your story, and I was trying to find it in the story, one of the things that they said is when they complained to the water department said, well, you must have a leak. And more than one resident was told the same thing, that you must have a leak, and that was the excuse.
Think about
what they're saying in the statement now, and even the statement they gave to News 12, is different from what they've told residents who have come to us with their water bill. And again, this was before Councilman Wallace even had this press conference. I didn't have enough to do a whole story on it, and I was trying to figure out where I was going to go, and then you had your press conference, and I was like, wow. So we piggybacked off that. So
now let me explain something to you. I'm a victim of this as well, and I want my money back. That's why I'm going to make sure that everybody who overpaid in the city get their money back. My water bill went, and I know mine is probably politically motivated and attacked, because my water bill went from $48 to $187. No, sorry, $387. And I wasn't even home. I took trips. I was away. When I'm away, my water bill went up?
What was more important for me than what you said and what Councilman Wallace said was when the lady got up and said she just received a bill for over $1,000 for her son's business that has been closed for 10 years.
Absolutely.
So if the water was still running, if the business was closed, shouldn't they have turned the water off? That's my one question. But two, how is she being built and the business is being closed? And she's saying the amount she's being billed was more than when the business was open. You know what I'm saying? Like the business has been closed for 10 years and she held up her bill, and I got pictures of it, and I've seen it, and she spoke on the record, on the mic. To me, that was more because, no disrespect, a lot of people say you're against the mayor, and you only say whatever, to get at the mayor. This
Absolutely.
lady has nothing political. This is what she was ordered to pay. This is what she, and then they're taking liens on people's houses for late water bills or something like that. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely, and making it harder for seniors to pay their bills. Seniors are on, and what outraged me the most is that seniors are on fixed rate income. And when you double their water rate or triple their water rate, they have to come up with this money, and they're already set with something. So you're talking about somebody who has a $50 water bill now getting a $150 water bill. It's not like they can go back to Social Security and other places and say, listen, they don't raise my water bill, I need a raise. It don't work like that. So we have to be mindful of all of these things. And it really pissed me off on how this is being done. And I took time before I did this. And this is not something I took lightly, because I've been investigating this for about a year. And that's when I even had the water department come to do an inspection in my building, because they said I went from 9 cubic gallons to 118.
Wow.
Okay, and all I have is
month?
per quarter.
Oh, quarter. But still,
but it's still, it went from 9. But think about it. I only have 6 toilets in the building, and nobody's really in there beyond 9 to 5. So how could that even be more than my house, where I take showers and water my lawn and do all these other things? And mindfully think about this. This year has been one of the most rainy seasons in the last 20 years of water consumption in our rain.
So you need to water your grass less.
So people were watering their grass much less, half the time. But now he's saying that everybody in Mount Vernon has started to water double watering their plants, washing their cars, and everybody else must be taking at least 10 showers a day now. So we usually have the cleanest people in Mount Vernon. So you have to look at this.
Since we're coming to the end of the show, I wanted to, last words, what can people do if they're concerned about this? What action can the people take? Well,
right now, what I'm doing now with the council is we're asking everybody to come in with their water bill. Take a look at your water bills. Compare them to the past water bills, and you will see the difference.
And actually, not just the amount, but the consumption as well.
Yes, because how can your bill go up when the consumption remains the same? And when you look at your water bill, they didn't. If they said that they had an increase, that increase would be on your water bill. I've got my latest water bill. That increase is not reflecting on my water bill of what I'm paying. And my consumption, and some people's consumption that I got, their water bills have gone down, but their water bill has gone up. So nothing is making sense, besides they're fixing, the water bills and creating, this false consumption rate and telling people they're using more, and then leaving it up to the public to try to prove that they're not.
And I want to just say, and just bringing the chart back up, New York City, hold on. New York City is
using more, and then leaving it up to the public to try to prove that they're not.
And I want to just say, and just bringing the chart back up, New York City, hold on. New York City is
using more, and then leaving it up to the public to try to prove that they're not.
And I want to just say, and just bringing the chart back up, New York City, hold on. New York City is using more,
and then leaving it up to the public to try to prove that they're not.
And I want to just say, and just bringing the chart back up, New York City, and actually the average New York City is using more,
and then leaving it up to the public to try to prove that they're not.
And I want to just say, and just bringing the chart back up, New York City, and actually the average, real quick because we come to the end of the show.
Real quick on the consumption situation. And you'll see it in my next article as well. When I did the math and did the comparison, okay, Mount Vernon, use equal amount of water to Arizona and Las Vegas. 2 places that are smack dead in the desert.
Yeah.
But we're using much more water than them. You got to say something is funny, and we got to look into this. And we're going to find out what it is, because eventually, if you follow the money, you'll find it. And you'll find out, and it'll lead you right to where the problem is. And we intend to do that.
I want to give Brother Opinion last words.
No, I mean, obviously just it's just a blessing to be here, and I want to thank you obviously for the platform. I look forward to hopefully coming back to have a debate. And like I said, just trying to get people.
So
out
for
there.
the record, will you come back and debate naysayers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm
Nada,
always-
we need to hear from you because you said on the air that you would come back here and debate Joe when you were on the air. So we need to now get your people to schedule what your availability is so we can put this debate together over the next month. Dr. Bob, any last words?
Well, I want to say that there's a near unanimity of opinion about the need for greater electoral competitiveness in urban centers throughout the United States that are dominated by a Democratic Party machinery that definitely does take people's vote for granted because there's no place else for them to go. And I think that we have called many times for the commissioner of the chair of Westchester County Democratic Party to institute some reforms to bring back party competition, and this presents an ideal opportunity to debate one of the few Republicans who have actually presented themselves up for the election, and I hope that in the spirit of embracing democratic reforms that we're going to see some sort of debate, if only here on our airwaves.
Also, we do have we're having the town hall on October 8th. So that's Columbus Day. So 2 p.m. At 11 Central Park Avenue. That's actually the Lincoln Park Jewish Center. So like I said, if you're a senior, if you care about senior issues, I want to talk about those issues. I want you to actually hear about our plan. You know, we live in a state where 80% of the healthcare services are consumed by seniors, and yet again, we have a healthcare system that is predicated on treating people under the age of 50 who are healthy. And so again, we got major issues here at the state level that can be charged, that can be changed. Like I said, some of it is partisan, but a lot of it is just common sense. And so again, I encourage people to get involved, reach out to our campaign, but more importantly, if we do nothing else, to hold the candidates accountable and to demand that they have a plan, demand that they can show you how they're going to improve your lives, not talk about what's going on in D.C., but what's happening right here at home and how they can help you in Albany.
And with that said, we've come to the end of the show. That's our time. I'm A.J. Woodson, your host. Dave McJones will be back. This is Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show every Sunday 6 to 8 on INTHEMIXXRADIO.com, giving you real talk for the community for 4 years. Until next week, peace.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy.